going through the system.
This call is now being recorded.
Perfect. So that was a nice recap that we went from experimenting and having fun taking photographs with digital technologies. Today we start on understanding how to get the balance right between photographing people, things, and places. When you're taking someone, and I will show you some images. I don't know how I'll be able to do that, but I'll send them on WhatsApp. There is need to figure out how far or how near to cast our focus when taking images or when taking photographs. I know right now the current technologies that we have right there, and the lady that sent the went ahead to practice having fun taking photographs. The lady who experimented sent us her images. You saw the plants that she sent. They were nice, they were beautiful. Some she tried to dim every other background so that she can bring out the flower that she wants us to focus on and see. And what she was doing is literally experimenting with photography. And I think that was, I like what she did, and I think it was a good thing that she did what she did. Having said that about her work, you have to figure out how far and how near your focus should be. So if you're taking Dr. Murungi an image, and there are 20 people crowded next to her, do you take the 20 people, the background, and the landscape of the building where they are, or do you focus on Murungi herself? That is what we are looking at today. A photographer should keep in mind and focus on the elements of composition and the technique that will best help to communicate what you're trying to say with that photo that you're taking, so that when we look at the image, like the flowers that she sent, and you can go back to the WhatsApp and see what she sent us, we can look at it and understand. Yeah, from the background, I could tell this is a family home. It's not an estate. The image she put there was able to tell us the story. And from the story, we are able to understand what was on the mind of the photographer when taking this particular image. Now, having said that, once you understand what to communicate in the images that you're taking, then you will know what your focus is, and that determines how close or far you stand when taking an image. There was another person, actually there were two people who sent images. Another person also sent an image. And on the image that was sent, the person that sent that particular image sent a hand, and after the hand, inside the hand, there was a bottle, like a heated bottle that was held. So I could not tell. The focus was the bottle, because the bottle again is very much hidden in the hand. Was the focus the hand? The focus was not very clear. So whenever you want to communicate, you communicate very, very clearly. If you want us to see the hand, the fingers, the nails, focus on that. If you want us to focus on the cutex, then stop covering it with much of your hand, and also stop confusing that there is something else. There are two things in the picture. If you're focusing on the two, take one first, put it aside on its own, take it. Then go and, like if you held the base of the bottle and the top of the top cover, the top lid of that cutex or whatever that was, in between your two fingers, and then you focused on the bottle, then you would have known what your focus was, and the communication would have been clear. So that is what I'm saying, that Once you understand what you want to communicate, you know what to focus, because your focus will determine how close, how far, the details you take in that image, and whether those details that you're focusing on are representing what you want represented. The settings in which you select for your photograph, you will use that to determine whether your subject should pose or just go about the activities without activities of the pictures being taken. One time, our former DVC academic, Professor Fatuma Chege, then she was Dean School of Education, we were in a conference and we went for a photo shoot. After the seminar, we were being trained on something by Commonwealth. And I did not know you can take an image walking. And she told us, let me tell you something else we can do. Instead of just posing still, let's walk and let the person take images as we walk. And you know what? Those images turned out to be the best. I will go look for them somewhere because I have them. That was 5 or 6 years ago. I have them, we were walking, but they turned out to be the best in comparisons to the ones that we took while walking. Okay? So what am I saying with this? We need to focus. And we need to focus on what means, what we want to be important and to us. To me, the picture where we were walking, it turned out very, very nicely. More than the ones where we stood, we posed. So now the background, you have to look at the background and advise whoever you're taking images on how to pose, where and how. Because you're the one focusing, and what you're focusing on should be the best. Now, having said that as well, anticipate that when you take the photograph, since you can predict the subject's behavior, you know someone is about to sneeze, or someone is about to cough, or someone is about to rub their eye, then you, the photographer, you have to keep predicting the behavior of whoever it is that you're taking the image. So that when you take that image, you won't take the image with someone's mouth wide open, because why will they take that image? Unless the intention was to show us the throat or the tongue or the teeth, and then those teeth would be the focus. That tongue would be the focus. The throat, the tonsils would be the focus. So then whoever is taking the image has to predict. If it's on a highway, of course, vehicles will keep passing. So predict so that when you take your images, they will be focused and they will be uninterrupted. And you will only capture that which you want to capture. Okay? Now, you also need to balance the relationship of the objects within the frame. Yeah, the frame of that image, to bring out your story as you want it to be seen. And this is all that you've been saying, and as you want it to be understood, so that as the viewers will not start coming up with stories that do not communicate what you want to communicate. Now, I want to share my screen and I want to take you to some video that will ground that which I've said verbally. What I've said, I want to show you videos that demonstrate the same. In other words, I'm emphasizing and re-emphasizing that which I've said verbally by also taking you an extra mile so that you see it being done by other people. I've given the example of the 2 ladies that sent their images. The whole class, only 2 people sent. And we've used the example. Now let me take you to the world so that you learn from those others. I'll start presenting. And then for you, it is watching and learning as you keep making fun of it. And I hope you learn something. You don't just watch and forget what you've learned. So I'll remind you, our topic is understanding how to get the balance right between photographing people, things, and places. And this first video will do exactly that for us. It's coming in a few.
How many times has someone walked?
Oh, sorry. What happened?
Fast and affordable rides at the tap of a button. Bolt, the smartest way to move. My name is Emily Sialontai. I'm an ICT professional.
Sorry, I think that's not the right one.
And I work at a children's organization.
Just a moment. Let me take you to the correct one. I don't know what has happened there. I think I pressed something else. This is the one I want you to watch.
How many times has someone walked up to you and handed you their camera and said, hey, can you take a picture of me? This is the most common photo scenario. It's a picture of people, which is known as a portrait. So where do you place the people inside the frame? You need to use the rule of thirds. It's super easy to use this rule. Imagine that you draw two vertical lines at the 1/3 points in your frame, and then you draw two horizontal lines that are also at the 1/3 point. Typically, you want to place your subject on either the left 1/3 of the photo or the right 1/3 of the photo. You also don't want your subject just facing straight towards the camera, but have them facing one way or the other. Now, let's place my body on the left third and get your subject to face their body inwards into the photo and then look at the camera. It's a very nice placement. But what you don't want is to have your subject on the left 1/3 facing out of the photo. The reason for that is because your viewer's eye will follow what your subject is looking at, and your viewer's eye will leave the photo and it will never come back. So place your viewer either on the left third or the right third. Now let's talk about where the face goes, because this is the most important part. Do not place your face in the middle of the photo. You don't want a shot where the face is in the middle and then the second half of the photo is sky. You want your face to be on the top 1/3 line, preferably where two of the third lines intersect. This can be on the left or it can be on the right. Now let's say that you're standing in front of a viewpoint of some type. You want to do a second thing now, and that is to place the most important element on the other third line. So here's what I mean. Let's say I'm standing in front of a lavender field and there is one stone house out in the middle of that lavender field. You want to place that stone house on the right third of the photo. So I'll be on the left third. I'm looking at the camera. The stone house is on the right third. Now you have a perfectly composed photo.
That person is teaching you how to balance people, places, and things. And is clearly telling you how to capture the stone house, the lavender plantations, and also the person in the image all together. So the focus is the person, the stone house, and the lavender plantations, and they are captured and balanced perfectly. And that is what he's trying to tell you, how you can do that and ensure that you get the balance.
You want to avoid anything that is busy in the background from protruding out from, especially the head of your subject.
Now, when you talk about a busy background, like your focus is the lavender plantation, the stone house, and the person. So if cows pass by, you let them pass. They'll make your image busy and unbalanced. When banks come, they are flying, or a car passes, or an aeroplane passes in this field, then again, they will make the background busy, chaotic, and messy, that you will not achieve what you want to achieve in the image that you're taking. So if you want to just capture something, even if it's in a busy environment where there is a lot of activities happening, like a football pitch, then you remember, like the lady that was taking some, the plants, flowers, she would dim some part of the image because they are making the background busy, and she could tell this is not my focus, so she dimmed it. Thank God to technology, you can blur those other things, they are not significant, and focus more on this one thing that you want to. But when you have more than one thing that you want to focus on, blurring might be difficult. If you have a background you want to capture and focus on, then again, if you blur the photo, then the presentation of that image does not come out right. So listen again and hear the more tips that he's giving you.
Take that same photo and say that I was on the right third, right in front of the stone house. And not only am I blocking the stone house, but there are elements of it that are coming out from the sides of my head. It doesn't look good. And this is especially true telephone.
Yeah, you see Vile Anaka. Now see, there is also a tree where I've posted, right? There is a tree. That tree looks like the branches are coming from his back. You know, that one is making a background busy, chaotic, and messy. Again, we said, as a photographer, you need to predict what will happen. So that is why you hear, simama hapa, face that way, squat, do this, because they know what they're focusing on and they want to capture it. I hope we are together. Nyawera, are we together?
Yes.
Nyawera? All right. Agnes, are we together? Duta? Elizabeth, are we together?
Yes. Yes.
All right, thank you.
Poles and trees. So you want to make sure that there's nothing behind your subject's head that is going to become a distraction in the photo. Let's say that your subject was not standing in front of a viewpoint, but was just standing in front of a non-textured background. Now, this is a time where you don't need to apply the rule of thirds, and you can, in fact, place your subject in the middle of the frame, ensuring that the face is on the top third line. So place the face on the top third line, put your subject right in the middle, and now this is a symmetrical looking portrait, and this really works. Now here's the real secret sauce with portraits, and this is how
you remember we talked about symmetrical and asymmetrical balance. I remember sending those details on chat, even though I explained it in class, how you can acquire symmetric balance and asymmetric balance. Balance that is balanced and balance that is not balanced. So I just was reminding you, the charts are still there, so you can go back in case you think you feel it's a new vocabulary for you, like those that were not in class and never watched the videos, so that you can be at par with all of us and get conversant with symmetrical and asymmetrical balancing.
Go from an amateur photo to a pro photo. It involves blurring out the background so that the face of your subject is nice and tack sharp, and the background is completely blown out and blurry. This is how you make your photos look.
That's blurring. The lady that took the image plants, I could tell the one that, and is it pink and white? The background was blurred. The person that took images, is that what you did on that image where we had the short flower with white and pink? Are you in class?
Yes.
Okay, so this is what the person is talking about. That which you're doing with that image, it's what the person is doing. Yes, Tupunya is also agreeing.
Pro. Now, the way to do this is very easy. If you have an iPhone or an Android phone, there is usually an option inside your camera app called Portrait. Use that, and it will blur out the background. If you're shooting with a digital camera,
that is perfect, because someone was asking, hey, I did not even know we have those features. Where do we find them? So you've had, from this video, you've learned, and that is why watching and learning is very important. The person has told you, you go to portraits and you'll find that feature there, and you can start experimenting with it. And I want to give you this again. You are 18 of you because I'm logged in with 2 gadgets. So -2 because of my 2 gadgets. 18 of you, you take your images and blur the images and focus on what you really want us to see, so that you're still experimenting and having fun with photography, but now again with focus. So here it's balancing and focus that we are focusing on this second activity.
Camera, it's also easy to do this. It's really just 2 steps. Step number 1 is to choose aperture priority on your camera and adjust your f-stop number, which is that tiny little dial, to the smallest number. Your smallest number may be f2.8, it could be f3.5. You just want it to be the smallest one you've got. Then you want to zoom in your lens to the maximum amount of zoom. And when you do those 2 things and ensure that you are focusing on the face of your subject, then the background will be completely blurry and your portrait is going to look professional. So here's your recipe. Step number 1, move your subject around so that your subject will be on one of the third lines in the frame. Step number 2, adjust your frame so that any interesting elements that are in the background will also be on one of the third lines. And step number 3 is the lighting. Let's say that you were taking a photo of me and there's a sunset behind me. The sky is very bright and your camera is going to read that very bright sky and it's going to make the frame darker. So that means that I'm going to turn out to be silhouetted. I will be dark, but the sky behind me will be bright. One way of compensating for that is to bring the camera closer and to use the flash on your camera to illuminate your subject. Another way of compensating for it is to move your subject so that the light is on your subject's face. This is the far better way to go. You can use natural light from a window, and one thing that works very well for that is to take a bed sheet and hang it over the window. This diffuses the light and makes it soft. Another way of doing it is with artificial lights, like I'm using here. I have a very bright light on camera right. This is known as the key light. This is the strongest light. Then there's a less bright light over here, which is called the fill light. It just kind of fills in the shadows on the dark side of the face. And this is how you can do it very easily using artificial light, even using lamps inside your home. So let's recap your recipe. Step number 1, move your subject using the rule of thirds. Step number 2.
You've had step number 1. Tell your subject how to stand, where, and how. And when you are using lenses, focus on any of the vertical lines. So it can be on the left, it can be on the right, but when he's standing directly facing a line that goes vertically at the center of the person, that image will be balanced. So whether you decide it's to the left or to the right or to the middle, then that image will come out clearly. Point number 2.
Move your camera and use the rule of thirds to capture any interesting elements that are in the background. And step number
camera. He has given you 3 tips. Focusing and arranging your subjects that you're taking images. Then also you, the photographer, moving your camera and moving your positions. You've seen some people, mtu analala mpaka chini. Analala chini kabisa akikupiga picha because of the focus. Mwingine anapanda mpaka yuko juu. Maybe apate the aeroplane view. Ndio apige hiyo picha. The third point
3 is ensure that the lighting is going to be correct on your subject and that your
so the lighting, the background light, whatever it is, zooming in, zooming out, you're working with the lighting to make sure that the light is enough to what you want us to see. So those are the 3 tips you're getting from him.
Subject is not backlit, like having them stand in front of a sunset. That's the basic recipe for taking portraits, which are the most common photo that you're going to take during your lifetime. My name is Tim Shields, and I'm a professional photographer. If your photos are turning out blurry and you don't understand depth of field, or if you struggle with finding good compositions, then I would like to invite you to pick up a copy of the Photo Cookbook right here on this page, because inside it, I'm going to give you 30 recipes that allow you to easily take photos.
Okay, so now that is it. I'll stop there. You take the points that you're taking home from that lesson. I want to take you to the second video. We are understanding how to get the balance. And this video has given you tips, examples, demonstrations on how you can get your balance right. Whether you're taking a portrait, whether you're taking a landscape, or whether you're focusing on three things like a person, place, and objects together in one photo. So I hope now from this class, people will take better photographs because they have all the information they need to balance their photos. Then we go to the second video. And then again, I want you to watch it and learn.
So let's start out with this question. What makes a good digital camera? Do you know? Well, it's kind of complicated. It's hard. It's always changing. But there are a few things that you can establish as things that are not going to change over the next 10, 20 years about a camera that you want to look at and say, okay, this is a good camera, and this camera is maybe not as good, or maybe not for me. You could even maybe say that.
Is this video visible? Someone can unmute and tell me. On your end, is it visible?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Thank you for feedback. Thank you for feedback. Let's continue.
So first of all, I want you all to think about build. Whenever you're looking at a camera, you want to make sure that it is built well. So that basically means that you want it to have a weight that works. So you want it to feel right in your hands. The weight should be proportional, and it should be both not too heavy and not too light. I tend to like.
I want to focus on this point where it talked about the quality of the camera. Now, you realize in the market, we have quality things and we also have fake things in the market. When you buy a digital camera that is not quality, you also expect some things even to come out even as you try and use. If you just try and focus, you realize you're turning the lens and the lens will come out. So the person has emphasized on quality. There are quality brands, and those brands also have got imitations. And these imitations may not last. But now you have to do due diligence to know which one is original and which one is fake. Because that which is fake will not give you the service that you need. Even just looking at how it's built, yeah, you'll be able to understand. And this is what he's telling you. What makes a good digital camera? And he's saying how it's built. Yeah? How it's built. If it's built kobe, bago, it will give you bago service, kobe service. It will not help you much. Some parts will also come out within no time. You know? So the build of the camera is one thing that he has emphasized when you're looking for a good camera. Let's proceed.
Like heavy cameras, so I like something that feels like a big heavy book in my hand, sort of. But some people like to have light cameras. The reason you want a heavy camera is because when you push on the button, the camera shakes less and you get less blurry photos. And when you have a light camera, you just have to be more careful about that. But a light camera also has the advantage of being more portable, something you can put in a bag, carry with you more, and so maybe you'll take more photos with it, which is also better. So that's a matter of personal choice, and I just recommend picking up a lot of cameras to figure out if the build is right for you. You also want to make sure that it is not too plasticky and it doesn't feel like it's going to break. You want to make sure that it feels substantial in your hands and that it fits, and that when you push on the buttons, everything feels like it responds quickly, and that you're not pushing a button that might break at some point. So you want to buy a quality product, the best quality one that you can buy, because it's something that you want to use over many years, and it's something that you would like, if possible, to keep in your life. So do your best to pick out a camera that's going to be able to do that. And you also want to take a look, like I kind of already mentioned, at the controls. You want to make sure that all of the...
Point number 2, the control features. What control features does it entail? Are they going to give you the service you're looking for? Are they going to do the job you want them to do? Are you taking commercial images? Do you want to take professional? What features do you need? So control features are very, very important. When you're buying your phones and your computers, it's the features that you say, this one does not have this, it has this other one. So number 1, the build. Number 2, the control features.
Buttons are within your reach, that everything is going to be able to, you're going to be able to change things. So maybe you have some special ability or disability that will require you to be able to push the buttons in a different way than maybe a normal user would. So make sure that you're picking a camera that will do all of that for you. In terms of things that must be there in terms of controls, I would say you really want to have some control over your white balance. And let me go back and write out white balance. This is an important control, and you also want to be able to control your exposure. So some sort of either exposure control of some kind or exposure compensation at the very least. Spell it right, exposure compensation. So make sure that both that and that are present somewhere in the camera.
So he's telling you those are key features that whenever you buy any phone, any gadget, any webcam for the computers that you have, as long as it is camera, it is camera. Whether it's in a computer, in a phone, or a camera standing on its own, then you must ensure it has got white balance, and you must ensure the exposure compensation is also there. So that's the most important if you want to take professional images.
This is something that's available even in some of the most inexpensive cameras, so you should be able to find that. Now, moving forward, kind of along similar lines, you really want to take a look at what metering system the camera is offering. So a lot of people in the consumer market are looking for a matrix meter, which gives you the whole viewfinder, gives you a really good idea of how the whole scene should be lit. And you do want to make sure that you're picking a camera that has the metering systems that will work for you. Generally, they're pretty much all cameras these days have good metering systems, so you don't have to worry too much about that, but just something to keep in mind. You also want to make sure that you're not over-processing your images. So do look around on some review sites, and we'll post those with this video, places where you can go and find advice. But you want to make sure, so here's, say, your sensor right here in this camera. So this is a digital SLR. You can see that because you've got the mounts right here, and you've got the prism up here with the viewfinder. And so it's the sensor, and then the sensor reads it and sends it through a computer to turn it into a file that you can use. And that processor makes a lot of decisions about what the final video, what the final video or what the final picture is going to look like. And sometimes it does what's called over-processing, which means it makes the images just too saturated or sharpens them in funny ways or just does odd things to them. So you want to make sure that any kind of processing that's happening is really subtle and really mild, because you don't want your photos to look cheap or gimmicky later on. You also want to make sure that the camera is usable, that it doesn't have too many features so that you get overwhelmed and you feel scared of it. You really want to be comfortable with it. So you're going to have to pick a camera that somehow meets your learning curve a little bit, but also pushes you a little bit. You don't want it to be so amazing, such an amazing camera that you're completely overwhelmed.
A very important tip right there. A simple camera that's not intimidating, that is not throwing you off balance, that is confusing you with the many things it has. Get a simple one that can do the job you need to get done. And this is where we are, because now the technologies that we have are very advanced. So you don't have to actually get a camera to get all that. The web camera will do all that for you. The digital phones that you have cameras that will do all that for you. Nowadays, things are inbuilt. But if you're buying a standalone camera, also it's important to buy one that's simple, because you might even press some buttons without knowing that will change the images that you want to change without your knowledge that actually you even touched something. Meaning it's a very complex thing, very sophisticated for you to handle. But if then you're conversant with the sophistication and that is what you want to go by, then again, it's still okay. But simple is okay. Complex is also okay for those that are able to maneuver and use the gadgets well.
Buy it and you feel like you don't know how to handle it. You want a camera that you feel comfortable with, and know that you can always someday later down the road, when you're a better photographer, buy a bigger camera. And it takes a long time to become a good photographer, so give yourself some time for that. Now, you also want to make sure that your camera is a part of a good system, especially if it's an SLR. This is less important with point-and-shoot cameras, but you want to make sure that the lenses are good. You want to make sure that the flashes are good. So up here, sometimes there's a flash that goes on there. Any other things that you might need for your camera, maybe if you want underwater photography, make sure that there's a...
So we've said build, the build, how the camera is built is number 1. 2, the control features. 3, simplicity in the features. So the features has to be there. You look for those features, and in particular, the white balance and the exposure compensation. If you're buying a standalone camera, like the one he's showing us is a camera, not a phone, not a computer. Yeah, it's a camera. Yeah, the lens now is the 4th thing where we are, the lens. If it's a CCTV camera, you want that lens to be able to see, including in the dark. And you want to see clear images when you download them, even if it's dark and there is no lighting. So the lens of the cameras that you buy will give you the quality that you want. Yeah, there are lenses that will not see anything. They will see bright things passing if it's dark. There are those that have LED in them. So the camera has got its own LED, right? You don't see it, but it will take clear images just like you take during the day. So the lens is a very important feature. So listen from him. He has given you 4 things you need to look for in a camera. Lens is the 4th one.
Waterproof case for it. Things like that. You want to make sure that it's going to be able to come with everything you need, because you might have a great camera with an awesome sensor, but there's only like 2 lenses on the market that are available to you, and maybe you need more than that. So make sure that all that fits. Now, along the lines of the lens, often the lens is everything. A lot of people talk about megapixels and da-da-da-da. Really, I find that the most important thing in most cameras is the lens. And if you have a good lens, you're often going to be set. You want to make sure that it has a good wide aperture. So you want to make sure that that at its, and I need to aperture.
So that is how to know the lens is good. It must have a wide aperture. Wide aperture.
Sorry, been a photographer for so long and I still never spell aperture correctly. You want to make sure that it can shoot in dark situations, so in low light. So
can shoot in darkness, can shoot in low light. So where the lighting is poor and where there is no lighting at all, that lens will still capture an image. I want you to go out later at night when it's dark, you go out and you take an image of something and see whether you see anything, and share with us what you think so that we can be able to understand the lens of your camera, how good it is. Or when you're buying phones, you say mine has got how many megapixels, but literally he has told us it's not about the megapixels, it's about the lens. And nowadays you see people have got cameras with how many lenses? Sometimes even up to 8 lenses looking at you, so that they take good images. Now I want you to go at night. I don't know, maybe you have a very good quality one, very high megapixels. Go in the dark, take an image and share with us. And also, the first video was on balancing. You take that image and send to us. Now this is the second assignment I'm giving you. Take an image outside when it's dark, not where there is lighting, where there is no light, and then post to us. We see what your lens is able to capture. And that is for everybody.
You want to make sure that it has a wide aperture. Something like 2.8 is really nice, but you can also go a little up north of that. You know, you just don't want to get up into the territory of like 5.6. You want to stay below that if possible. So that is going to give you more flexibility and freedom in low light. You also want to be careful, please, please, please. Most important here, watch out for the difference between optical and digital zoom. You want to have a good optical zoom. This is very important. This just means that the glass is doing the zooming. Digital zoom is something that you can do all by yourself in your computer by just cropping your photo. So just basically like cutting the edges off and just highlighting the spot in the photo that you want. And digital zoom, I'm not even going to take the time to correct it because you do not need to know how to spell it because you do not care. Digital zoom is such a gimmick, you don't even need it. Don't worry about it.
So now you've understood the two important features here is the optical zoom when you're taking an image. Then digital zoom, you can apply it when you're modifying your images. Yeah? When you're modifying your images, you can use digital zoom, but you cannot use digital zoom to take your images. Even if you use it, you think it's helping, it's not helping. So buy a camera that has got optical zoom, whereby the camera can be able to zoom, 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 zoom to what you want it to focus onto.
That go and take a look at the optical zoom because that's what's actually important. And you want to have on digital cameras, you want to have a three times or plus optical zoom. I mean, if you want to zoom a little bit and have a little bit of freedom, that's generally a good number. But most cameras these days are coming with that more, so you're probably okay. So check that wide aperture. Check to make sure that you have a good optical zoom. Also, be careful. There's a lot of them out there that are now optical zooms that are up to like 20 times and things like that. And you want to make sure that you're looking out. Check the reviews for these kind of cameras. They call them mega zoom lenses, and mega zoom lenses can be really nice. I actually had one a long time ago that was an excellent camera, but they have something that is called, I think it's chromatic abrasion, which is when you zoom in too much, you're going to get sort of little color discolorations around details in your images, and it's basically just the lens reaching its optical limits, where you basically it's been pushed over the line, and now it's distorting the colors in your image. And you want to make sure that you're not doing that. Yeah. Now we're going to move on to, I think, what's the most important part. No, other than the lens, the most important part, which is the sensor.
Sensors.
So let's go take a look at sensor sizes. First of all,
so from the lens, now you go to the sensors. That is the fifth thing that you need to look at to identify a good camera. Sensors. And he said it's the most important.
It's like a little light sensitive block in the back of your camera. And it's made up of lots of little smaller blocks called pixels. And each little block is saying, oh, I see brown, or I see blue, or I see white, or I see, well, gray, or white, or whatever they're seeing. The sensor reads that off, puts it into a file, and then sends it to the camera. The camera then puts them all together and saves them as a file. So each of these little megapixels is very important, and they're very important in a lot of different ways. Now, 35 millimeter film back from the old days was this big right here. So you can see this is kind of a very standard size. Now, digital cameras, when they came on the market, they immediately shrunk down to much smaller sizes because 35 millimeters is a pretty big space. And so a lot of smaller cameras that you see, a lot of like point and shoot cameras will use these sensor sizes here. A lot of cell phones use these sensor sizes here, but they're slowly moving back up right now. The market has been kind of calling for bigger sensors. Now, in at least in professional photography, full frame is a very big deal. You don't necessarily need a full frame camera to make a great digital photo. There's not so much of a direct relationship there, but a bigger sensor is better because it allows you to control the depth of focus a little bit more, so the depth of field, and it also allows for a higher quality image often. Not always. It depends on the make of that sensor. So a big sensor can be just as good as a small sensor, depending on how good the small sensor is and how bad the big sensor is. So let's talk a little bit about that. What makes the difference between a good sensor and a bad sensor? So there's two different types. There's CCD and there's CMOS. Generally, CMOS is at this point known for shooting generally better photographs, but CDC is getting better all the time, and there's some incredible cameras out there that are CCD cameras. And it has a lot to do, like, the quality of a sensor is determined first by its sensitivity to certain types, certain colors and light, and its ability to work in low light. That's really where you're really going to make the difference between a good sensor and a bad sensor, is at a higher ISO. So if you're at like 800 ISO or up, that's where you're really seeing how good a sensor is, because it's going to be really testing to see if that sensor is very light sensitive.
And now here people are following very keenly because they're understanding the quality of their phones. They are going back to the researchers to see these features, because now the next time you're buying any phone, you'll be going to the camera to see the features and the particular ones mentioned here, whether they are represented in your camera, to make sure you're buying quality, you're buying the best.
And also you're going to want to watch the color reproduction. You want to make sure that the colors are pretty true. Even in the daytime, though, you can take a look, and you also want to take a good look, a close look at the reds and oranges, because this is very important to also to catching a good versus a bad sensor. Bad sensors are often bad at red, they're often bad at orange, and sometimes they're bad at yellow and other colors. You want to make sure that the color reproduction is good, that, like we said, that it's not over processing. You want to make sure that it has a good high ISO setting so that you can take photos in low light situations, which happens all the time. You can do that without using your flash. And both CCD and CMOS camera sensors can do both of these things well. It's just a matter of finding the right one for your needs. You're probably not going to be able to, if you're a normal person, afford a full frame camera yet, and I wouldn't worry about that. But try to, like, if you're buying a new camera, think about that. There's not, if you end up with a 1 1/6 inch sensor, you can still take amazing photographs with it. It's not a matter of that, but it is a matter of how much easier it will be if you have a bigger sensor. So that is a basic introduction to sensors. You want to make sure, again, good color reproduction, good quality. Oh yes, I forgot the most important part. It is not about the megapixels. You know, everywhere I look in advertising and things like that, megapixels are always being sold.
Actually, he has repeated that. I think this is the best thing now. We've learned something, and that is very important for us. Now, before our time runs out completely, I hope you can extend a little bit. We can go through the very last video. It's a very short one. So you've learned on the what makes a good camera.
So every morning when I wake up, this is what I see. And it's a great example of viewpoint, which is going to be the subject of today's lesson. Viewpoint, and we're also going to talk about camera angle a little bit, although really we're talking more about viewpoint. This is an example of viewpoint because, well, when I wake up.
So in this particular video, the focus is on angles and viewpoints, because these are the things that you want to, the views that you see, most of the images will be taken from your view, your point of view, your point of focus, your angle. Yeah? So from the point where you are, what you take, the image you take will come out from the representation of the angle, the angular position that you are into as the photographer. So you can take someone from the back, from the front, from the side, from the front, depending on the angle that which you are. So this one is on angles and viewpoint.
I always see my friend Frank here looming above me on my, this is sort of on my windowsill. And one morning when I woke up, I just thought, you know, I should take a picture of this because, well, I wake up every day looking up like this and it's kind of a cool image. So I took the photograph and it's a perfect example of a low viewpoint. So you have in photography, you have low viewpoints and then you have high viewpoints. And we'll show you an example of what a high viewpoint looks like in a second. You also have one called eye level, which we'll be taking a look at later as well. So let's take a look here at another low viewpoint. Here we are back in Montana, where I come from, and this is my sister on her horse, Jake. This is
what position do you think the person that took the image was? Lying down, squatting? Because the house looks too huge. Was the person up somewhere on a tree? Just have these things in mind because we are talking about focus, focus, focus.
Another example of a low viewpoint. And you can tell that because I'm down on the ground, I'm in the grass. And the reason that I chose a low viewpoint in this case is because I wanted to emphasize my subject. Every time you're making a choice in composition, you're making a choice about emphasis. You're picking your subject and you're saying, this is how I want to pull them out of all the mess and confusion of the image and emphasize them. And in this case, I thought, you know, the best way to make Steve and Jake stick out on this background is to put them on the sky, because it's a big empty palette where I can sort of make that shape that says horse and girl on horse.
So that is how we brought the focus, by making sure from the house upwards, you only see a bare background, which is the sky. And so you're able to see clearly the horse and the girl lying on top of the horse.
Really apparent, and you can see, I can still see the mountains in the background, Mission Mountains that I grew up near, and you can still see the field, but I chose to put that all on the lower third. We talked about this in our rule of thirds lesson.
Lord.
And I decided to put everything else up top here and to really pull them out of the whole picture and make them the emphasis, make them the star of the photograph. So that's one reason to choose a really low angle. It kind of adds drama, it adds emphasis, and it also adds a level of importance to this image. It kind of gives it a sort of a different feeling than if you're looking down on the subject. Here we've got a high angle image, and this is just a snapshot. I was riding in a bus one day on my way home from work, and the sun was shining from the west, and you can see this causing a really great silhouette on this biker's sort of on her hair and sort of on her coat, and you can see the car is kind of lit up very cool. It's the light's shining into my lens and catching some dirt right here and kind of causing a little bit of lens flare. But you know, I just chose this image because it's an unusual way of looking at a street. You don't usually see the street from this angle, especially if you're walking around on it all the time. And so it's just kind of a good example of a high viewpoint. A high viewpoint also kind of has a feeling of looking down on someone. So there's also a certain sort of power relationship involved in high viewpoints. A lot of times if you want to take a photograph of a child, you'll be looking down on them if you're a taller person. And there is sort of power relationship involved in that. So like in the last image where we were looking up at Sadie and Jake up against the mountains and the sky, we were giving them a lot of the power. In this case, we're looking down on them and saying, we're bigger than you, and we're looking down on you. So that's another thing to think about when you're choosing a viewpoint for an image. Here is an example of a house guest breaking the rules of the house. This is Spencer. Spencer was not supposed to be laying on my bed, but Spencer decided to anyway. And when I came in one day, while he was visiting, I thought, well, this is a pretty cute picture. So I took a low angle shot, and then I hopped up on my chair and I took a high angle shot. Now these are two very different pictures, and you can kind of see why. Here you can see we're at eye level, and I just wanted to take basically a portrait of Spencer. I wanted to capture him as you would experience him if you were sitting on the floor next to the bed maybe. Well, then over here, I kind of thought it was kind of funny how this leg right here sort of matched this camera strap that was coming off. This is my camera bag right here. It had been laying there because I was doing some photography work that day. And I had a microphone case there for something I was doing too. And I just thought it was kind of a funny little sort of mirror image in a way. This sort of like my camera bag and the dog were sort of similar. And so this picture was taken just to kind of capture some of the humor of that. It's not necessarily very funny, but it just kind of is sort of meant to be a little bit funny.
Okay.
And this kind of just gets at the fact that using your viewpoint can tell two very different stories. And that's really important when you're doing photography. Storytelling is really what you're trying to do. And if you're trying to tell the story, if you're trying to tell this story with this picture over here, then you're going to have a hard time. So you have to change up your camera angle. You have to try some different things. And I would recommend whenever you're trying to tell a story with a picture, or whenever you're just trying to take a picture, try lots of different angles. Go low, go high, move around, try different things. Don't just shoot it.
And you can tell from this first image is very busy. There is the wall. The wall has got stickers on it. And then there is the dog, there is the bag, there are the bendings, there is the corner of the wall. And then the second one is less busy because it's the bend, the dog, the bag, and I don't know whether it's a box or a notebook or whatever it is. But the image looks too busy, From this
angle, shoot it from over here as well. And that will produce more interesting and better images. Now here is sort of a more serious image. This is a very different image than the last one. This are some friends of mine from a project that I did a long time ago about them trying to get justice for their son Stephen, who was killed by a coworker. They felt that the government had mishandled the case in investigating Stephen's death, and so they were making a big case against the U.S. government at that time, and they still are actually even years later. I took this portrait of them with their son, with this picture of their son in their hands, and I really wanted to make them important, just like I did with Sadie and her horse in the beginning. I wanted to put them up against the sky, but I didn't want to take them out of their context completely. So you can see here I put the background at about 50%, so it's about half. You can see the background is taking up about 50% of the image, and then I stuck them out up into the sky because I wanted them to be emphasized. I didn't want the sky, if I was standing up straight up and taking the portrait from a normal eye level, the background would have hit them right here, and they wouldn't have seemed as important. They wouldn't have seemed as interesting. And I also wanted to have Stephen right in the middle of my portrait. You can see that I'm breaking the rule of thirds, but I'm putting them in the middle and trying to create balance to offset that. You can also see that, this is just a very different way of approaching horizon. And this is getting at the point that you really want to think about what your subject is. So our subject is here. But you also want to think about your background and their relationship to that background. This background is important. Stephen right here worked in this corral a lot. This is where he kept his horses. And this was the horse trailer over here, for example, or one that he used a lot. And I wanted to have those things in the image because they told a story. And I did that by lining them up. So you can see that you have these three things all lined up right there. You can see that they're sticking out in the background. They're important. But at the same time, this background is also important. So you want to think about those kind of things when you're composing your images. And even if it becomes at some point subconscious, you want to constantly be doing that sort of thing. Here's an image that I took at a local sort of community center on my street. And I was just going to visit and trying to get some pictures of some people working. It's a sewing and sort of woodwork types. And right here you can see our friend here is just putting needles into this cloth here. This image on the left is a very just standard picture that you would take as a photojournalist or even just as someone working at this place or taking a picture of your friend. It's eye level, so you can see the camera is about at her eye level or a little bit below. And, you're just trying to simplify the background. But I felt like this image needed something else. And so I thought, okay, so here we've got our eye level our eye level attempt. And then I thought, well, how about I get high and see what this looks like from above? So I stood on a bench and I looked down on the table, and here I got this image right here, which I think, and at that moment I realized was a lot more interesting because it really simplifies everything. All this stuff that's going on behind her right here, all these shelves and things that are conflicting with the shape of her, making her not stick out from the background. A lot of that stuff is simplified, and yet you're still getting the same motion that you're getting in this image. You're getting it right here, but it's just a little bit more interesting. So here we have a recent example of me kind of playing around with viewpoint and camera angle at the Holocaust Memorial in Berlin. So again, we have here to the left, we have a high angle shot, and to the right, we have a low angle shot. And these images tell very different stories. This kind of gets, again, the storytelling element and some of more the, maybe the kind of feeling part of photography that you're trying to kind of bring across to your viewer. Here to the left, you can see the man is sort of searching and looking through. He has kind of maybe a feeling of maybe questioning where he's going. And by taking a higher viewpoint, you can kind of get to that feeling in a different way than you could if you were standing.
I think we can end that video right there. That video has talked and exposed us to highs and lows. And that is a very, very important aspect. I want to stop presenting. Now, you've learned from this last video that the eye level that you choose as your angle view to your image will bring a different dimension and a different story to your image. And remember, every story is taken so that it can communicate, so that it can tell a story. You've seen his kind of photography. He is a high and low angle person. You've seen his images. You've seen the high points and the low points. Now you know the difference in high points and low points, and he has given you a lot of information why he focuses on the lows and why he focuses on the highs. And now, as you experiment with your photography, you can choose to be like him and focus on the angles, the highs and the low. Yeah, of going by the second video that we watched, you can focus on the thing that you want us to see alone. So if it's a person, you can take even the 3/4 of a person from the chest upwards and focus only that without having all the details that make your image look busy, like the third email, where you have to capture all the details that actually, if you don't explain them yourself, people may not get to know, like the image of the son that was killed and the parents holding the image. If you just look at that image, you may not tell the truck what belongs to this son that was killed. And the horse is where the son that was killed was working. But because he's taking his images to tell stories, he's taking in all sorts of angles to be able to communicate what he wants to communicate. And the very first video also told us how you need, the features you need to focus on a camera. Was this the first or the third? But that is what we've learned from the videos. How to know, identify a good camera, the features you can go by. And as a summary, maybe as we wind up, I want people to tell me what are some of the features you learned that are important. You need to consider them in your cameras when you go buying next. I will ask Ndirango Wamboi. How do you identify a good camera?
You can, with a good lens, if a camera has a good lens, it
Yes, a good length.
And if it has it,
A good length, yes. Bogwa, how do you identify a good camera?
I'm looking at how it is built.
Yes. Perfect. Ainda?
The sensor.
Karanja? Keremi?
The simplicity in the features.
Yes. Keremi? There was Keremi here. Yeah, so Keremi is, thank you for feedback. I believe you've learned. I've given 2 assignments. I've sent you you go out with your camera, whether it's your phone or your computer or your camera standing alone. Go outside in the dark, capture an image, send to us on WhatsApp. Also take a camera where you've focused and balanced the subjects, the background, and whatever you want to focus, the background, the objects, and the subject. So I want to see that. I also want you to try blurring. So low light performance. Low light, I actually want the dark now. Tupunya is typing in because he doesn't have voice. He's saying the low light. I actually don't want the low light. I want the dark because low light will see something. Okay, if where you are, you cannot go out in the dark, then you can try before it's dark. So you can go with low light like Tupunya, but if you can go outside in the dark and take an image, then so be it. If you feel your life is threatened, try Gioni when the light is low before it's dark. And then send them to us on the WhatsApp so that we can be able to follow on what you've learned on this particular class. Any questions from the members of this class? Quiet means no question. Then I want to end the recording. I wish you all the best. See you next week on Monday. God bless you. Bye.
Bye.
So our next class will be on Monday. Bye, Tupunya. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
I want to stop the recording. I said stop it.